When she won her seat in Parliament in 2011, even Ruth Ellen Brosseau was surprised. She had no previous political experience and hadn't even set foot in the Quebec riding she would end up representing. But since that election, she has silenced all her critics. She won her seat again in 2015, and today she is NDP House Leader. She joins me now from Ottawa. Good morning.
Good morning, Ben.
Ruth Ellen, what triggered you to run for office in the first place?
So the way I was elected in 2011 wasn't a traditional way. In 2011, we still had public financing of parties, so it was important, and I think all parties did it. They had candidates run in all the ridings. And in 2011, we had an election coming up fairly quickly, and so they were looking for candidates in Quebec. And I had a lot of friends. At the time, I was working at Oliver's, the bar at Carleton University, student-owned bar. And so they were looking for candidates, and a lot of my friends were involved with the party, and they asked, would you be willing to be on a name on a ballot candidate? And I explained to them, listen, my son's 10 years old, I'm working full-time here, I don't have enough time or the money to be able to travel and campaign, but it was a way of supporting the party and letting the people of Berthier-Mascouche vote for the NDP. And kind of know the story after. We did very, very well in 2011. We kind of had an orange wave, and this was a historic moment for our party because we were able to elect a lot of women and a lot of young people in the House of Commons, and this is for the first time the NDP, we formed the official opposition. So I ran because I believed in the NDP. I believed that we needed to have different voices in the House of Commons. The House of Commons needed to be more representative of Canadians, and I was really hoping to contribute and be a positive change.
And I'm fascinated by the difference between your first election and your second, because you increased your vote count in the second election, and that was despite the rise of Trudeau's Liberals in Quebec. You did a great job there. What was the hardest part of the learning curve for you when you decided this was going to be something that you were going to take very seriously? Was it learning French? Was it getting to know your riding? Was it earning the trust of those who had voted for you in 2011? What was the hardest part for you?
Well, after being elected in 2011, we were kind of teamed up with a veteran MP. I worked a lot with Jack and Thomas Mulcair, but then I worked a lot with Jean Crowder. And I really learned very quickly that it's important to be a strong constituency MP. And for me, yes, I had to learn, the procedure in the House of Commons, but because I didn't come from my riding, I was a name on a ballot candidate, I had to work really hard to get to know my constituents, build trust. So I spent a lot of time meeting with my mayors and different groups. And I remember what struck me in 2011 was a lot of the people I was meeting with were saying, this is the first time in a long time we've seen our federal representative, come sit down at a table with us and ask us what our priorities are. So for me, it was really important to get to know everything I could about my constituents, what their priorities were, so I could be that strong voice in the House of Commons. I think at first the hardest thing was dealing with media because before 2011, as you know, I was a bartender. I worked a lot in the restaurants here in the Ottawa area. I had a private life. So, after being elected May 2nd, 2011, it's getting used to having a very public life. Traveling between Ottawa and the constituency was quite something.
Now, how do we encourage, Ruth Ellen, how do we encourage more young women to consider a life in politics? In the light of the Me Too movement and Time's Up, we hear stories of how difficult it can be in Ottawa for women. How do we invite more women in and let them know that now is the time for them to join up?
So in the context of the Me Too movement and sexual harassment, intimidation, that's been very quite public. I want to say that the courageous people that come forward, that we believe you, and Parliament, which I think you can see right behind me right now, we're not à l'abri. So this still happens, and even in the House of Commons, all parties have been affected by this, and this is something that we're taking very, very seriously. I've been House Leader for the NDP for about 3 weeks now, and I worked really hard on the first stage to get unanimous consent on Bill C-65 expedited to committee. It was a sexual harassment and harassment bill that covers everybody on the Hill. So I was able to work with the other parties to make sure that we got that fast-tracked to committee. Being elected in 2011 and re-elected in 2015, this is still an old boys club, the House of Commons. There's 338 seats in the House of Commons and only 26% of the elected officials in the House of Commons are women. So we need to do a lot more, all parties, to make sure that we have more women elected in the House of Commons. So there was a measure proposed by my colleague Kennedy Stewart. Sadly, that bill was not even sent to committee. It was to incentivize parties to have almost parity when it comes to general elections and candidates. So in the last general election, we had 43%. You know, I think this should not be a partisan issue. I think everybody agrees, all parties agree that we need to get more women involved in politics. It's just making sure that we adopt measures very quickly to make sure in the 2019 election we do have more women elected in the House of Commons, and we do change the culture.
Ruth Ellen Brosseau, thank you for sharing your story today, and congratulations on your new position as House Leader.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.